And welcome to the Transfers podcast powered by FootballTransfers.com, where we bring you news, analysis and insight on the most important, the least important things, football. I am Ronan Murphy and I'm delighted to be joined on camera and on audio, as always, with all of the above, by Duncan Castles. Welcome, Duncan.
Good to see you again, Ronan. How's your transfer window been?
It's good. I'm just very nervous to have you on camera. It's just such a special experience for me. It's what the listeners have wanted, what the viewers have wanted all along, and now we finally got it. And what is 2026? And that is the most important signing of the window. Duncan Transfers to camera confirmed. Yeah, I'm just so nervous. I'm just not over.
I recommend a blindfold. That's the solution to the nerves.
Yeah, I do. But transfer window, it's not been the busiest transfer window, I can all say so far, but it is maybe heating up a little as we come towards the closure of the window, which is on Monday, which is bank holiday in Ireland, but I will not be bank holidaying because, of course, I will be working because transfer deadline day and I'll have to get my yellow tie out. Do you have a yellow tie yourself, Duncan?
A yellow tie? No, I don't have a yellow tie.
No, it is tradition on TV on transfer deadline day. So maybe if we have an episode on transfer deadline day anytime, we might have to get the yellow ties out. For now, we just will keep you informed with all the latest movers and shakers. And yeah, Cole Palmer to leave Chelsea. Is that happening? What is going on there?
Look, this is really interesting situation with Cole Palmer, and I've been looking at it this week and trying to find out exactly what the background to all the discussion that he could potentially be leaving Chelsea in the summer, that Manchester United were pursuing a deal to take him back to the northwest of England, and there is truth to Cole Palmer being unsettled in his position at Chelsea, I think is the way to put it. Talked to a couple of sports directors. One in particular asked him, have you been offered Cole Palmer? His answer was, everyone has been offered Cole Palmer. And his understanding of the situation was that Cole Palmer is not happy that he is no longer necessarily the central creative force in the Chelsea squad, the Chelsea team, because of Esteban's arrival from Brazil, because of Esteban's initial impact at Chelsea. He wants to be reassured that he is the most important creative force there. And that has resulted, it seems, in his representatives going around the elite clubs of Europe and indicating to them that Cole Palmer could be interested in the move and asking whether they would be interested in taking it. Now, that doesn't mean that Cole Palmer will leave Chelsea in the summer window, certainly not in the January window. But it does mean that we can expect some movement there. And it does mean that he certainly is trying to create leverage in his discussions with Chelsea, in his apparent desire to be reinstated as that key figure he was at Chelsea before Esteban arrived. He's had a really poor season relative to his incredible first two seasons at Chelsea. 37 goals and 20 assists in 70 Premier League appearances over those last two seasons. 4 goals, no assists in 12 Premier League appearances this season. Obviously, injury has been a factor in that, a big factor in him not returning the same numbers. But there is this discontent in the background. Esteban is not yet in the position that Cole Palmer was a season ago. But Esteban's in his first season in English football, 18 years of age, being brought through gently, but already has 5 goals, 2 assists in 25 Premier League games and Champions League games. And he's definitely on course to fulfilling that potential we described, Julio Gomez Filho described in the Transfers podcast, I think a year and a half ago now. What various people in football have told me, this player is a future Ballon d'Or winner. So you can see where the problems could be from Palmer's perspective. Can they have two players of this type in the team? If Chelsea had to make a decision over which one they keep, and we look at it from a purely financial perspective, then you would think that Palmer would be the one they would look to sell. Palmer has the higher estimated transfer value from our SciSports analyses, just short of 100 million. Interestingly, down from his personal peak of 119 million last year. Estevan at 76.2 million, but Estevan should go up. He is paid less than Palmer. Some people will say that he is a less complicated individual to deal with than Palmer, less demanding. So from a financial perspective, from that trading model that Chelsea have, we know they have to keep turning over players. They've been clear. Palmer is untouchable. They don't want to sell him. But these kind of situations where you have an elite player discontent with his situation or the situation at the club are always fragile, and they're always open to someone coming in and saying, yeah, we'd love to have him as the centerpiece of our team, and we're prepared to try and exploit that situation in the coming months. So I think this is definitely real. It's definitely a live factor. It's definitely something the top clubs are considering. It's definitely something Chelsea have to handle, even though they're trying to put this fire out. You have the new coach, Liam Rossignol, who's had an excellent start at Chelsea, being asked about it, asked whether assurances were needed for the Chelsea fans, and his reply was, there's no reason for assurance. It's so unrealistic. It's come from nowhere. There's nothing in it. There's no reason to have the conversation. That's where I'm at. Cole is very happy. I've had numerous conversations with him. Our thoughts are on how we can make this team better, how we can improve, and how I can help him. And I think from Rossignol's perspective, he definitely wants to have both of those players in his squad. Definitely wants to be building the team around both of them. But as I say, there is smoke to this fire. So don't take Chelsea's assurances that there's nothing going on here as anything beyond the way a club has to deal with a situation like this when they haven't decided and they don't have a resolution to what to do. And it's fascinating that conflict has developed so quickly, and that Palmer has responded to Estevan coming into the team, not really being played in his position to date in this fashion.
Like you said, there's no smoke without fire, but Cole Palmer, it seems like things are heating up for Cole. And he's doing his talking off the field at the moment this season, you might say, because what's he doing? What's he done on the pitch? Not a lot, but he's got a new trademark going on. He's got a fancy new personal logo. So good for him for that, but it's not really helping his performances on the pitch. And if he does want to stay at Chelsea, if he does want to be Chelsea's main man, he needs to really put in the performances to match it, because it's hard to be the main man if you're not contributing on the pitch. And like you said, yeah, he's had these complex physical problems.
It's clearly his body has not been correct this season. So that's definitely an element there, and that again, that's something that Chelsea will want to see fixed. So maybe, and I am just speculating here, but when you have this kind of repeating, you've had Chelsea coaches talking about how it's a bizarre physical situation and not really able to work out whether he's ready to play or not. He'll come in one day and he's fine, and the next day he feels wrong. Maybe if that can't be fixed, that also factors into this decision. If Chelsea, who will have the best medical data on the player, start to come to the conclusion that actually there might be a more longer term problem with his consistent availability, then again, if you've got a big offer for a player of that type and you have a replacement already in the stable, maybe that's an incentive to take it.
Yeah, and obviously if you are concerned over that he might have injury problems down the line, yeah, definitely is the time to sell. And like you said, it's interesting to see that Chelsea are kind of struggling to find out what it is, and maybe they'll get conspiracy theorists out like we have in the NFL at the moment. San Francisco 49ers, there's a story doing the rounds that they're their training facility is too near to a power station, and that's why they keep getting injured. So hopefully it's nothing of that sort at Chelsea. But you have you have some more non-conspiracy Chelsea news first too.
Well, they brought one of their younger players, Aaron Anselmino, Argentine defender, back from loan in Dortmund. They're also looking at opening up some more of their overseas loan slots. Obviously, there's a limit in those. Kendry Pais came back from Strasbourg, where he basically hasn't played in the first half of the season. Again, I think Julio Gomez-Filho discussed some of the problems Pais was having off-field after Chelsea signed him, I think at 16 years of age, and he spent an additional year in South America before moving to Strasbourg. He's been loaned back to South America, going to River Plate for the season. We'll probably see more movement there. They've obviously finally got rid of one of the really bad signings of the Blue Coat era, which was Raheem Sterling, when Manchester City were happy to move his wages out of the club. Took a substantial fee from Chelsea, and Chelsea put him on huge wages. An agreement there that he would take compensation on his contract, allowing him to join potentially another Premier League club. And it doesn't have to be in this window now, because he's now a free agent, so he can let his negotiations drag on beyond Monday's transfer deadline day. Another of the young players at Chelsea who hasn't quite made it into the first team, but is considered a major talent or a significant talent, Tyreek George, who they were close to selling to Fulham at the end of the summer window. Benfica have been looking to get a deal in place for George. They are very keen to take the player. The agent is working to make that happen. The problem is the cost. Benfica are proposing a loan with an option to buy. Chelsea would like a guaranteed fee on that deal. Benfica haven't given up yet, so there is still the possibility of that move happening before the deadline. And Benfica, obviously, one thing that will make a substantial difference compared to when they opened discussions with Chelsea is they've got themselves at least 2 more games in the Champions League after that spectacular finish to the game against Real Madrid on Wednesday. So there's a little bit more money for Benfica to play with there as they try to equip Jose Mourinho with a squad. And we've talked in this podcast about how much Mourinho's been berating Benfica and asking for new players, but equip them for a squad for the second half of the season.
Yeah, be interested to see what Jose does for the second half of the season. And I heard a little coming out from Dortmund about that. And Anselmino recall, they didn't expect it to happen. They didn't think it was going to be an issue. They expected it to happen per season. I know he wasn't necessarily a guaranteed starter there, or he hadn't played a whole lot of games. He only played something half the games for them this season, but there is disappointment there, and they are frustrated at it happening. So we'll see, does any fallout occur from that with negotiations down the line between these two clubs, because they sometimes when the bigger club pulls their weight, the smaller club doesn't necessarily like it. Yeah.
That's interesting, Ronan. And Dortmund are one of the not quite a top tier club in Europe, but definitely top of second tier. And recruitment very important to them, and developing players. Is that typical for Dortmund to take a 20-year-old from a Premier League club and allow a recall clause to be left in the contract? You know, it's all very well taking a player on loan for a season, but that's almost championship level club operation to say, oh, we'll take the player and we'll allow you to have a recall clause. Usually Champions League clubs will say, no, we have to have him for the season.
Yeah, I think it's in more of a case it was just inserted and didn't think it was going to occur, and that's what they've seen happen to similar deals in the past. It was just like, this is just on paper, but it doesn't actually really be activated, because you will have situations like this happening where you might have loggerheads between the two clubs or things like that. So yeah, I think it's just a standard thing for them, but they didn't actually expect it to be activated at all. Barcelona and PSG have been trading, but the player that PSG have signed actually paid more for them than was expected.
Yeah, this was a deal. It's a funny deal. This Dro Fernandez leaving Barcelona for Paris Saint-Germain. Funny and unusual in a lot of ways. Primarily of which was Paris Saint-Germain did not expect to do this deal in this window. It was a player they were targeting for the summer, and they knew that there was a potential to take him in the summer. So just to fill the listeners, the viewers in on Dro Fernandez, is an 18-year-old attacking midfielder at Barcelona. He has played 5 times this season in La Liga and the Champions League, 2 starts, and delivered 1 assist in a Champions League game against Olympiacos. Hasn't started since the beginning of December. Barcelona unhappy about losing the player, and the president, Joan Laporta, immediately going to Catalonian media and saying Dro's departure has been a big surprise. We had agreed to an update in Dro's contract as soon as he turned 18, but surprisingly his agent told us we could not proceed with that. It's been an unpleasant situation. Now, the guidance I have as to how that came about is, again, this is kind of the level of player who almost all the top clubs are looking at, because he hadn't signed that full professional contract, would have been available on training compensation before too long. There was a possibility of doing a deal at a low number. I'm told he had proposals from Manchester City, Chelsea and Borussia Dortmund, amongst other clubs, to move to them in the summer. The player himself, made this happen after a conflict with Hansi Flick. He was unhappy with his opportunities and the coaching of Hansi Flick, and instructed his agent to get him out of the club, and get him out of the club immediately. Not wait for the summer, get it done in January. There was then communication from the player's agent side and the player to Luis Enrique, who was an admirer of Dro for a while, that he wanted to leave now and could they bring a move forward. That led to Paris Saint-Germain communicating with Deco and checking to see if it was the situation that Fernandez had asked to leave. Deco said yes, it was, and Paris Saint-Germain therefore said, right, if you've decided to sell him, if you're going to accept the player's desire to leave, if it's a situation that can't be resolved, we do want him, and we will take everyone else out of the equation by overpaying the release clause. So the release clause was €6 million. Paris Saint-Germain agreed to pay €8 million to get the deal done immediately. And they bring him in the space, I think I'm told this happened in the space of a couple of days. Essentially that fallout between Flick, Dro Fernandez, the communication on the club channels, then a formal request to do a deal and put through that way. You don't see this happening very often in football, where the club has targeted a player, they're interested in taking in the summer, but they're going to wait. And then the player himself, young player, tells his agent, because this wasn't, I'm told, driven by the agent, driven by the player, tells his agent, get me out of here now. Can you do it? And we end up with a situation where the president of Barcelona is having to explain the exit of a player that had been perceived as one who would potentially develop into a regular first-team starter before too long.
Yeah, because that's kind of how Barcelona do operate in the market. They develop all these young players, they obviously buy experienced players to go around them, but they had developed these players. We've seen so many of them come through the club, and they thought that they would have this guy for years and years in the future, but he's going to be the one that got away for a long time, I think.
Yeah, and as you say, either years and years in the future, or at least get him on that long-term contract where they can stick some ridiculous release clause of €100 million or for the first contract, and then be in a position where they can take a significant fee if someone like Paris Saint-Germain comes for the player.
Yeah, 222 million. I think Barcelona were bitten once by that. So it's not going to happen again. So that's why we sometimes see these 1 billion release clauses now for players in Spain.
Yes.
And yeah, it's just astronomical. But it's good for the headlines on some of the websites to say, oh, someone signs a 1 billion contract. Another player, PSG, Ousmane Dembele. He is also one that is on your radar.
Yeah, Ousmane Dembele, a natural segue from what we were just talking about, given that he was one of the two players that Barcelona bought when they lost Neymar to Paris Saint-Germain for 222 million euros, I think was the release clause on that. Failed at Barcelona to become that player. Paris Saint-Germain then take him to France, and he becomes the best player in world football last season. Ballon d'Or winner, won everything domestically, won the Champions League for the first time, and the central point of that Paris Saint-Germain team in terms of being the player that Luis Enrique developed into the replacement for a central striker. Incredible presser, finisher, creator. Placed himself on that very top tier of footballers, and is now trying to have his contract upgraded appropriate to the tier he's on. Story came out during the week that the Saudi Pro League was interested in signing Dembele in the summer. Again, an interesting backstory to this. The story came out just as Dembele's agent, Moussa Sissoko, was due to meet Paris Saint-Germain to discuss the terms.
What a coincidence.
And that exactly, I think, was the reaction of Paris Saint-Germain. They didn't take the bait on that and are insistent that they will improve Dembele's contract. He's not quite the best paid player at the club at present. I believe he's number 3 on their payroll, but he's in their top category of players. They basically will operate a system where they have 4 tiers of salaries. He's in category 1. All of those tiers, you receive significant bonuses if you play 65% games or more. We're talking millions of euros net extra when you get to 65% of the games. And there are also additional bonuses for achievements such as winning the Ballon d'Or. PSG are prepared to improve and add some new achievements, take them to the top of that category 1 of players, but they're kind of insistent that they won't get caught in a trap of paying for past achievements. So they don't want the discussion to be, I've won the Ballon d'Or, therefore you must make me the best paid player at the club, and my salary must be significantly over everyone else. It's, well, you've done that, we paid you for that, we'll give you a new contract where you can be the top earner within category 1, and we'll give you some bonuses if you win the Ballon d'Or again, or if you win the FIFA prize, or if you win the Champions League prize. We're ready to do that, but we're not giving you a higher than everyone else base salary because you did it last year. You've got to continue to achieve. And that's kind of part of this mantra that Paris Saint-Germain have turned themselves around with. It's, we got ourselves into a huge hole by going and signing players like Neymar, Messi, Sergio Ramos, who were living on past achievements and never performed at the very top level for us. We got rid of all of those. We brought young players in. We brought hungry players in. We've got to make sure that the squad remains like that, stays in that condition. Otherwise, we could repeat those old problems. So that Dembele conversation will be interesting to see whether he's prepared to accept that. Paris Saint-Germain aren't really under any great pressure here because they have significant duration on the contract. So they can allow this to draw out. They don't have to give him a new contract immediately. They're prepared to do it because of the quality of what he's achieved, but they're clear they won't do it at the wrong price.
Yeah, it seems the way to go for PSG at the moment. It seems clever compared to, like what you said, the Galacticos era of PSG that was a disaster essentially, and now it's working for them. And this incentive-based contract, like if you do think you're going to be as good as last season again, then we'll gladly pay you, but you have to be as good as that season again. So it seems ideal that if he believes in himself, that he should take what they're offering, and if he doesn't believe in himself, that's a totally different question altogether.
Yeah, it's an interesting approach they have. It's from the sports director, Luis Campos, who came in and basically said to Qatar when they offered him a job, I will take this, I'll work for you, but you've got to let me have complete control over appointing the coach, bringing players in and moving players out. If you don't let me have full control, it won't work. And what I'm going to do is get rid of those top paid players. Anyone I think isn't delivering and is being paid too much for what they produce in the field is out. We want to move more towards younger players, hungry players. We want to move more towards French players. And he's implemented all of that stuff. And he's very performance focused. So the deals are, as I've explained, those big bonuses for making 65% of appearances brought in across the board. But it's not just him, it's Luis Enrique as well. And I think we've seen this through Luis Enrique's spell in the club. He's not been scared to drop players. If he thinks a player, regardless of name or status, is falling below what they should be delivering on the pitch, and also what they should be delivering on the training ground, they're out. And they have to wait to get back in. So there's this real kind of, it's a difficult thing to do in the modern era, but Paris Saint-Germain have managed to achieve it, which is, we don't care about status, we don't care about name. This is a team, we're building a team. If you don't deliver for the team, then you go on the outside. And if you don't respond to be putting on the outside, we'll sell you. And they've managed to implement it successfully and not only won stuff, but produced incredible football doing it. But it's a tough thing to do.
Yeah, I think that's the approach you used to make me put my stocks up on the podcast this week. You got David Ornstein last week, and then the pressure was on me to deliver this week. And hopefully it's gone well so far. But yeah, I think the Saudi news leaking kind of very much a smokescreen, or it seemed very coincidental. And we're not seeing maybe those massive moves from Saudi at the moment. I know that there could be in the summer, but yeah, this market generally hasn't really been a busy one across the board.
I think while Paris Saint-Germain's responded in that way to the news of the Saudi interest, I think Ousmane Dembele is a genuine target for the Saudi Pro League in the summer. We've already talked in the podcast how we'll in the summer we get to that 3-year point after the first big wave of Saudi Pro League spending, which means that a lot of the contracts that they committed to will have expired. And they can dump a lot of the players that they feel they made mistakes on, or have got too old now, or are overpaid. So there is scope for them to bring, and we'll definitely see this. We'll talk a little bit later in the podcast about one player that they've secured for that. We'll see young players coming in. We'll see them going head to head with the European clubs for some of the most talented young players, and even in the teenage area, which we see Manchester United, Arsenal, Manchester City, Chelsea pushing hard on, and constantly looking for that guy who has the potential to be a top player down the line and trying to secure them at a cheap price at an early stage. But we'll also see them going for big names. And Dembele is an obvious target for the Saudi Pro League, just as Vinicius Jr. has been an obvious target for the Pro League, and they've thrown huge contract offers at him, and Vinicius Jr.'s position is still in flux, even though he's managed to get rid of Xabi Alonso, even though he's prepared to talk to Real Madrid about a new contract being put on the same terms as Kylian Mbappe, which is what he's asking for. But Saudi will work on that. I'm sure they'll work on Dembele. The question, as always, is a player like Dembele at 28, who has established himself as a Ballon d'Or winner, is he ready to cash in the chips and say, right, that's fine, I had one season where I won the Champions League, second season, whatever happens at the end of it, and now I'm ready to go to Saudi Pro League and take 3 times the money I can get or 4 times the money I can get in Europe for the rest of my career. And that's always the hard decision for these players. And Dembele, like if you'd asked me about Dembele 5 years ago, I would have had Dembele in that category of player who maybe you could persuade, because he had that reputation of not being focused in training, a video game player, sleeping in, all kinds of off-the-scene problems. But he converts, and huge credit to Luis Enrique and also the player himself. He converts himself into the hardest working, most technically capable forward in world football. Like this incredible combination of press, run, defend, and create chances and finishes chances that is close to being unique in the modern game. There are not many who play that way. You know, you look top strikers, Erling Haaland. Erling Haaland does not contribute anything like what Dembele does in the general field of play. He's an incredible finisher, but as a rounded player to work in, if you try to put Haaland in Paris Saint-Germain's system, you damage the system, for example. So is Dembele, having shown that desire and application, is he a player to say, right, I've done enough, I'm going to Saudi Arabia? Now, I think probably not. But I don't think that will stop Saudi Arabia from continuing to try. And obviously the agent is open to speaking to them and encouraging those offers, and open to establishing a benchmark with which he can say to Paris Saint-Germain, oh, we've got this offer from Saudi, you need to get close to it.
It's definitely a good negotiating tactic, but you can see why Saudi are interested and remain interested in him, because he's gone from that kind of hit and miss kind of player to someone who's super consistent and performs all the time, and was now last year the best player in the world. He has the awards to prove it. It's not just him saying that. You might see a very busy summer from Saudi in the summer, but that's not January where we're looking at now. We only have a couple of days left a few days left in the transfer window. It's not really been the busiest one, has it?
It's as we predicted, that it wouldn't be particularly busy. I think the first pod we did in January, I said to you, I thought Antoine Semenyo would probably be the biggest transfer fee of the window. I don't think that's going to change. If you look at the Premier League overall, only 7 of the Premier League clubs have committed £10 million or more to transfer fees, not a transfer fee, to transfer fees in total so far. That will change. We're going to see, I think, a significant number of deals, particularly at the bottom end of the division, in these next few days. But only 7 have spent more than £10 million in transfer fees, and only 12 of the 20 have bought anyone so far. So it's kind of like it was last January. There's been a bit more volume of trading. There's been a bit more spent. Again, we would expect that because we have those new TV deals in place. So there should be an increment on last January, but nothing like the massive increment we saw in spending in the summer. That huge increase on fees. And, one of the reasons, as we've explained, is clubs are just more careful about their dealing these days. They take less risks, and they know it's harder to get players in January because they're less available. They're fewer out of contract, and also this European factor, which is finally that's out of the way. The fact that the Champions League, Europa League, and the Conference League run almost to the end of the window. It was only Thursday night we saw the end of that. And as we explained in the first podcast, the window, if you are a sports director and you have a player who's unhappy and the club is looking to sign him, you need to have a replacement. And if you're at a top club, you need to have a high quality replacement. And that means you're probably going to be recruiting from another Champions League club or another Europa League club. Not necessarily, but that's a big part of the marketplace you're looking at. And those clubs, because of this wonderful Swiss model format we have, almost all of them went into that final Wednesday, Thursday round of games with the chance of remaining in the competition and the chance of not only winning quite substantial fees for progressing and even for winning those games, but, could be 20, 30 million, even more through the rest of the competition. So why then do you accept a 20, 30 million, 40 million bid for your best player when you can keep him, retain him until you know whether you're in the competition or not, and then sell him in the summer? You're going to get the same price or better in the summer anyway, most likely, and you have that additional money. So that basically UEFA have changed the dynamic of the January transfer window by introducing this new competition format. It should be noted that's done now, so we do now have until Monday that everyone knows whether they're in Europe or not and who's out. So there is that tiny little residual window if you have to go and try and get a player, but it's narrow. There's not much time to do it. It's harder to do the deals.
Yeah, and what you were seeing is that the clubs that didn't buy players or were able to buy players earlier, then they couldn't register players for these last couple of games. Like Roma brought in a couple of forwards before the end of the window, and they couldn't play them in their last couple of games. So they have to kind of wait till the next round of games before any new signing can play anyway. So it's worth the setting clubs holding them on to them for those extra 2 games just in case, because like you said, the difference in money is astronomical.
The other big similarity with last January is that if you look at those Premier League clubs that have actually spent money, the biggest spender again are Manchester City. Manchester City, we had that huge push to buy players because they decided their squad had got too old last January. And Manchester City, the 2 biggest deals of this window in terms of status of player, the 2 best readily available Premier League players, Antoine Semenyo and Marc Guéhi, have both ended up at Manchester City. And a lot has been made of Liverpool's summer transfer spend. That record output on transfer fees that Liverpool made, and also a lot has been made of how the team has declined in performance after it. But if you look at what City have spent since last January, in that last January window where they went crazy in the market, they're now at over €500 million in transfer fees committed, just in transfer fees committed. We're not talking about signing on fees. We're not talking about new wages. Over €500 million on 11, in inverted commas, first team signings. If you go through Manchester City's minutes allocated to players this season and look at the 11 most used players in the Premier League this year, only 3 of them are amongst those 11 new signings. Gianluigi Donnarumma, Tijani Reinders, and Nico Gonzalez. And you could argue Gonzalez is only in there because of Rodri's continued injury problems and period of recovery from ACL surgery. Last January they spent close to 80 million in transfer fees on centre backs alone. Abdelkadir Kusanov and Vitor Reyes. Reyes is on loan. He's not even played for City. Kusanov has been very much a bench player, only really getting into the team when they've had this raft of central defensive injuries in recent weeks. And when they have the opportunity, they go and take Marc Guéhi as the highest cost in terms of salary and signing on fee as a replacement to get him into the team because they don't trust Kusanov. So for all the stick Liverpool have had over the transfer dealing, I think actually Manchester City have been the least efficient spenders of cash over this 12 and a bit months period. And it's really quite remarkable how much money they put into the market and how little of it Pep Guardiola is putting on the field. And some of these players have been there for a year now, and they've still not established themselves as guaranteed or even regular first team starters.
Yeah, you kind of look at some of the lineups they've had for the last couple of years, and you have Max Lane and Rico Lewis and these sort of players in defence, and you're like, where has this $500 million been spent for you when you have, you're kind of looking at the lineup and like, is this Man City now? And you're looking at them playing Man United and like, might have a chance here. And then they did, obviously. So it's not the Man City of a few years ago. It's a Man City very much in transition, and the players they've bought for this transition don't seem necessarily like the players that are going to come out of this other side of this transition as Man City first team players.
It's not just Manchester United, it's Bodo Glimt. It's the inconsistency in Manchester City's performances this season. You don't bet on them winning anything as a kind of guarantee as you would have done 2-3 years ago. So it's a very different team. Obviously, they're playing a different style of football. Pep Guardiola has tried to reshape it to feed Erling Haaland. He plays more long ball. It's not settled. And it's going to be interesting what the next coach does. If Pep Guardiola decides he's had enough of it, and there are rumblings in the world of football, Guardiola unhappy when he was asked about it post Enzo Maresca's exit from Chelsea and Chelsea briefing, that he had told Chelsea as a part of a contractual obligation that he'd had conversations with City. But there are rumblings in the world of football that Guardiola is ready to exit at the end of the season. Again, we know how temperamental he is. We know he's an emotional individual, and if they have a good finish to the season, if they win the Champions League, for example, it could all switch, and he decides he wants to have another go. But as we've discussed on the transfer podcast, I think it was a Leeds story a couple of weeks ago, they've had conversations with Xabi Alonso. They sounded Xabi Alonso out before he was sacked by Real Madrid. He's now available for nothing. He's a player he's a coach they've admired for a long time. And Enzo Maresca is also there and available. Maresca changed his representation during the season, now represented by Jorge Mendes. Jorge Mendes has very good working relationship with City and a good working relationship with their new sports director, Hugo Viana. So those two individuals, I think, very strong candidates to be the guy who comes in if Guardiola decides to exit and have to make something out of this squad. My prediction would be if it's Xabi Alonso who gets it, and that's, quite a few people think that is the very, very much the likely outcome, that Xabi Alonso will be asking for new players rapidly and saying the squad is not fit for purpose.
Yeah, Xabi Alonso obviously likes the hard-working players who listen to his instructions, on like the Galacticos, or the wannabe Galacticos at Real Madrid. But yeah, Pep Guardiola is not going anywhere just yet. But I think you have news that's one that might actually be leaving Manchester City.
Well, they have a deal agreed now to sell Oscar Bob to Fulham. Total value is £27 million, 20% sell-on clause. And they've kept matching rights of the type they used to keep James Trafford away from Newcastle United in the summer, only to dump him into the reserves after they played him a few times, and spend a small fortune on Gianluigi Donnarumma instead. I think this is a fascinating move by Fulham, because that's a big investment on a player who's actually currently injured, has a hamstring injury, so questions about what kind of medical they can do there. Clearly will only be a partial medical. Bob's got very strong analytics in many ways. On our SciSports estimated transfer value, he comes out at 38.6 million euros, which is good for a player who scored just one goal in 26 Premier League appearances across 3 seasons. So it's not like he's a teenager. He's 22 years of age. He's been there a while. He hasn't, it's a hard team to break into, but he hasn't established himself at the top of the Premier League yet. Fulham believe that he can turn into that, and it will be interesting to see if he does, because that's a significant investment on their part. Another player who I think Manchester City would be happy to offload is Nathan Ake. Contract until 2027, 30 years of age. AC Milan have looked at taking him and decided that it was too expensive a deal, primarily because of the player's salary, which I understand is over €7 million net. Another club looking at him are Besiktas in Turkey. So potentially City could manage to take Aki off their wage bill in the coming days. We know there's a lot of money in the Turkish game at present, so it could be that they can put something together where they satisfy his wage demands, and he moves out of the Premier League after a very long and successful spell as a Premier League player.
Yeah, I suppose Man City have to do these sort of deals because they need money to come back in when they're spending 500 million or $500 million on reserves and players to end up loaning out. So yeah, Man City could be busy enough in the last couple of days of the window. And Man United, they any moves on the horizon?
They don't look like doing anything of great substance. They have the advantage of only playing in the Premier League. Got a limited number of games, got players back from the African Cup of Nations. We've talked about the long-term targets. They want an elite midfielder, and we know Elliot Anderson, Adam Wharton, Carlos Baleba, all Premier League players with great analytics, which is a very important thing for this new Manchester United. Are targets for the summer. What's it? They continue to look for opportunities. We talked about those, Premier League clubs signing teenage players who they think can develop. One interesting one that they have, I understand, been looking at is Kader Meite at Stade Rennais, France under-21 international centre forward. Estimated transfer value of €11.7 million. Asking some people in recruitment about him, they said, yeah, Manchester United have got this right in the sense that he's a top profile for the Premier League, very physical centre forward, suited to the division. Just 18 years of age at present. He has 5 goals and a little bit over 1,000 minutes in French top tier football over the last 2 seasons. But Al Hilal have come in and agreed a €30 million transfer fee with 3 million of bonuses. So it looks like Meite is going to bypass that move, kind of the obvious move to one of the top European clubs from Stade Rennais and go to Saudi Arabia. And I think that gives us an indication of the kind of firepower that Saudi Arabia, the Pro League, will be able to throw at this remainder of January, but in particular the summer market. And also that they're going for a talent who has broken through in the French top division, and the next logical move is to move Premier League, maybe Bundesliga or La Liga, and then they go and I think arguably have doubled probably the kind of numbers that Manchester United would have offered to get an agreement. Maybe not quite that much, but if that continues in the summer, it's going to inflate the market again, and it's going to make it complex for Premier League clubs who like to buy these type of players now.
Yeah, it's not really Karim Benzema that they're buying, or N'Golo Kante, or a player like this. It's a player who has all his career ahead of him, has a lot to prove, but has proved something already, and is the kind of player that a league who has ambitions to be one of the best in the world. These are the sort of players they need to sign. This is the market they need to be in, and yeah, we're probably going to see more and more of these sort of attempts or these sort of moves, at least in the summer, especially like you said, when those 3-year deals all expired and the likes of Benzema come to an end, then this is the kind of player that they'll want to be replacing him with.
Yeah, and I think there's also the potential there for the Saudis to secure those talents, maybe play them in Saudi Pro League for half a season or a season, and then loan them back to top tier clubs. Allow them to develop with the context of being in the top division and obviously radically increasing their value, and then they take the profit on on the transfer fees. So moving a bit more to a trading model and trying to acquire those elite individuals early on and have possession of the contracts so that they make money and feed it back into the system. I think that I wouldn't exclude that from happening. I think the Saudi Pro League are thinking a broader game than they were 3 years ago, where it was just let's get big names and import them into the league immediately.
It sounds a bit like Red Bull Riyadh. They follow the Red Bull model, and they have all these young guys coming in to sell at a bit of profit, like Salzburg and Leipzig and the various Red Bull clubs. That seems to be their model. But back to Manchester United, Casemiro is leaving.
Yes, announced that he would leave at the end of the season, related to that pursuit of a new midfielder, one of the highest paid players at the club. United had an option to extend for a further year. Still one of a consistent performer for the first team, but they've decided not to do that to free up the wage bill to place elsewhere. And again, Casemiro is the kind of player you would expect the Saudi Pro League to be targeting. Interesting to see if he decides that the Saudi Pro League is the next stage is a cash-in stage of his career, or whether he thinks there's another season or two in European football for him, because I think he can still perform at that level.
Yeah, we've seen evidence of it at times this season for Manchester United. At times he's been their best midfielder, so it's no reason to think that he couldn't do a Modric and move to Serie A and get himself another couple of seasons in Europe and play in a top 5 league. Elsewhere in the Premier League, Aston Villa look to be trying to get the band back together. They seem to be getting like when Red Hot Chili Peppers got John Frusciante back for a few albums after he had left the band. It seems to be that is happening at Aston Villa. Bringing back the old favourites, play the hits, as they say.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. Tammy Abraham and Douglas Luiz both coming back. Abraham had that one excellent season for Aston Villa in the Championship. Villa had been looking at a few strikers, including Jean-Philippe Mateta, also inquired for Gonzalo Ramos at Paris Saint-Germain. They managed to essentially buy Besiktas out of a loan deal. Besiktas had him on loan for the season. Besiktas pay Roma €13 million to make him their player, and then sell him to Villa for €21 million. And timing good on that one is last night Villa lost Ollie Watkins to a hamstring injury in their come from behind victory over Salzburg. They've been looking for a replacement for or a backup for Watkins for a while now, and they have one in Abraham. Also, I think it's significant bringing Douglas Luiz back. Not played much at Nottingham Forest, but again, Premier League proven. That deal is a loan from Juventus with an option to buy at €25 million plus variable payments. It's a good accountant's outcome for Aston Villa, given that they sold him to Juventus just a year ago for an initial €50 million. And again, they've got significant problems in midfield with Tielemans out for at least 8 weeks and Boubacar Kamara out for the season and John McGinn currently injured. But Villa going quite aggressively in this market, I think. And you can understand why, because they are in third place. They're just 4 points behind a faltering and I think a nervous Arsenal. And yeah, it's quite a thing to say, but I don't think you can rule out Villa the way they're playing at present, even with all of these injuries. Being in the hunt at the end of the season for the Premier League title. If Arsenal don't get themselves together, Arsenal should really be away. Arsenal should have had this essentially won by now, but they've allowed a pack to come back within range, and no one in this Premier League season is a guaranteed win. It's probably the most interesting thing about this division, with its reliance on set pieces and change of rules to make it easier to score at corner kicks and throw-ins, is that everyone bar Wolverhampton Wanderers is capable of beating pretty much everyone. So you can understand why Aston Villa are saying, okay, let's do the best we can in this market and see if we can keep ourselves in a position to maybe do something nobody would have expected.
Yeah, it's their best chance ever, probably since 1993 or 94 to win the Premier League when Man United were winning back then. So it's the best chance, and why not take that gamble? Because they're still in Europe. They are going to make money from that. They'll make money from getting into the Champions League next season. So this is the chance for Villa. Just kind of wondering whether Douglas Luiz is maybe the answer. I know he's brilliant the last time he was at Aston Villa, and that's why he commanded such a big fee, but Juventus did not really see the best of him. They did not get the best from him. So if he can turn things around and bring back that form he had before, perhaps he will prove a very astute signing, but the jury's still out for me, at least, on it.
I think he'll be a better fit to Unai Emery's coaching than Sean Dyche's coaching. Let's put it that way. So it's a better platform for a player like Douglas Luiz to perform. And you look at Aston Villa and then you look at Liverpool and the contrast there. Liverpool almost don't have a fit defender available at present. No fullbacks after Frimpong got injured. They've been short in centre backs all season. Yet no, absolutely refused to go head to head with Manchester City for Mark Guéhi, which is a bizarre piece of decision making, given that they had Guéhi agreed to come to them, only for the deal to fall apart while he was taking his medical, because Oliver Glasner forced Steve Parish to pull the plug on it. Given how bad their defence has been this season, given the injuries they've got, you would have thought they would have gone head to head with City and tried to convince the player to come and give themselves some kind of platform for the rest of the season, and also a player that they could build their defence around for the next few years, because I don't know what the lifespan on Virgil van Dijk is at present. Konate, I never been convinced by him as a centre back, and is out of contract in the summer. Joe Gomez clearly isn't the standard to be a starting centre back for Liverpool, and is repeatedly injured. So they're going to have to do something there. They don't want to do it now. They are trying to hold on to Andy Robertson against his will. Robertson is the kind of one fit defender who doesn't get to play because of Milos Kerkez at that left back position. Robertson out of contract in the summer, wants to play because he will captain Scotland at the World Cup finals and wants to play going forward, and has been given I think you can see why it's an appealing proposal by Tottenham Hotspur, 3-year contract, come and be a leader of a team that's really struggling, a squad that's really struggling, but go and continue in Premier League football. So there, a decision to be made as to whether Liverpool allow him to go as well, which seems to be dependent on Liverpool securing a return from Roma for Kostas Tsimikas, who's on loan there. But that's definitely something that can happen in the last few days, given that the player wants the move.
Everybody seems injured at the moment at Liverpool. I think that's probably down to Aristotle using the same 11 week in, week out. There's not a lot of rotation going on there at the moment. It's a heavy load on these players when they're expected to do so much, especially coming out of last season where they played so many games. They had so many late winners, that sort of thing. They have players like Salah at World Cup of Nations. So this is kind of a very difficult time for Liverpool at the moment, and they just don't seem to have a defence at the moment. And Virgil van Dijk has kind of been asked to do everything himself. And you're kind of seeing signs of old age coming in there. You're seeing Konate and Gomez, like I said, they're not necessarily the future of the club. So it is very kind of strange that they didn't try again for Guéhi to make him their long-term centre-back, because how many more years do they really have left of Virgil van Dijk there?
Look, I think everyone in the Premier League is suffering injuries. And I think the Club World Championship is a big factor in that. The way Premier League football is being played. the changes in the refereeing, the tolerance of physicality, all of those things add in. And I don't think it'll get better next season. I don't see the Premier League changing those rules to protect players. And obviously we've got a World Cup finals where you're going to have another summer where a big chunk of the players get very little recovery time going into next season. So it's
Andy Robertson has at least 7 games, I think, to play in the World Cup in the summer.
Yeah, and that's a very heavy trophy to lift. You could get muscle damage just picking up the World Cup trophy and hitting Donald Trump over the head with it.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. That Scotland Ireland final at the World Cup. But you were talking about the amount of injuries. Yeah, it's just every club is kind of suffering injuries. You mentioned it when you're talking about Aston Villa. Manchester United have injuries. Man City have their defensive crisis. Liverpool have it. So yeah, it seems to be more and more injuries. And yeah, maybe we might see some other players coming through the doors as clubs try to conquer those injury problems in the next few days. Yeah, so Jorgen Strand Larsen seems to be one of the players that has been linked with a few clubs. And I know our estimated transfer value of him is quite high. So there is that last season, I think, is where to call him that. But this season, he hasn't necessarily set the Premier League alight, but he's still a hugely in-demand player at the moment.
Yeah, Strand Larsen 14 and 35 last year, which, as you say, that should contribute to that estimated transfer value of 48 million euros. Wolves turned down £55 million from Newcastle United when Newcastle United were going around pretty much every club in Europe offering vast quantities of money for centre forwards. Look, there's Crystal Palace there trying to get Strand Larsen. You also have Leeds United trying to get Strand Larsen. You have this little nexus of clubs on the fringe of relegation, all trying to secure centre forwards at present. So you've got Crystal Palace, who've managed to get themselves all the way down to 15th place with 28 points, and a manager who wants to be sacked and get his compensation package. You've got Leeds United, who are 16th with 26 points. Nottingham Forest 17th with 25 points. All of them trying to keep a gap to West Ham United in the relegation position, who are also spending money. But look, it's interesting the kind of players they're going for. Strand Larsen has 1 Premier League goal in 21 appearances this season. If you look at his underlying analytics, he's one of the slowest centre forwards in the division and doesn't have great stamina either. The offer from Crystal Palace, the verbal offer from Crystal Palace, is £45 million plus £5 million in bonuses. The clubs are obviously trying to take advantage of the fact that Wolves are almost certainly going down with 8 points, and saying to Wolverhampton, we'll give you a little bit extra for this player before he becomes a championship player. But I think these deals are either a bit of a gamble or an indicator of the dearth of attacking talent there is in top level football at the moment, and how difficult it can be to score goals in the Premier League. Because 50 million total deal for a player who scored 1 goal in more than half a season is quite a statement. Palace also are, and I think they've almost got this done, going to take Evan Guessond from Aston Villa, loan with a £28 million conditional option to buy. Player who only joined Villa in the summer, and a player who, again, doesn't have that great a scoring record, 14 goals in 63 appearances over the last 2 seasons. And then Nottingham Forest look like they're going to get Jean-Philippe Mateta, who at least is a regular scorer in the Premier League, but at 28, and an asking price of £40 million, it's an expensive deal. But he does have 38 goals in 96 Premier League appearances over the last 3 seasons. He's also scored 2 and 3 for France. Could be France's striker at the World Cup finals. So if you're thinking resale value, even on an older player, there might be some there. And I think you could see him fitting into Nottingham Forest and delivering goals there. And in that case, you're actually buying something that looks like a guaranteed producer of goals and a guaranteed major assistance in keeping you in the division. Whether Strand Larsen comes in the same category could be proven wrong. Maybe if he goes into Crystal Palace system and Glasner decides that he wants to be bothered and wants to see them get some points for the rest of the season, then he will start scoring again. But again, I'm not sure his style of play is a particularly good match to Palace.
Yeah, that is definitely one where it's a wait and see what happens, because moving from Mateta, who, as you said, is a proven enough goal scorer, to Strand Larsen seems to be a very big downgrade for Crystal Palace. But maybe that's a great way to ensure you get sacked and get that payoff if you're signing this.
I don't think Glasner has got anything to do with this particular deal.
No.
And we should say Leeds United have the money there to buy a striker, want to buy a striker. So expect them to do something of significance in that part of the market. If they don't if they decide, as they've been indicating, that they don't want to match what Palace are offering for Strand Larsen, they don't get Strand Larsen, we should see them go somewhere else to get that centre forward in to try and keep them in the division. And this is very typical of a January market. It's clubs who are scared of taking the massive financial hit going out of the Premier League, prepared to spend what don't look like them on the most sensible of deals. They're prepared to take a gamble and prepared to go for players that they might not go for in normal circumstances to satisfy the coach, to get someone in to see if it makes a difference. West Ham United already signed 2 strikers early in the window. They, I think, they're in a very strange position for a club that faces relegation, in that they've effectively lost their best player or the most creative player against their will, in that Lucas Paqueta has managed to force his way out of West Ham United in what, regardless of West Ham United's situation, is a really interesting deal, in that he's going back to Brazilian football, back to his former club Flamengo. Transfer fee of 42 million euros, which is the highest transfer fee ever paid by a Brazilian club, indicator of the financial strength and increasing financial strength of the Brazilian game. If you want to know the details behind that, I suggest you go back to a pod we did with Julio Gomes Filho, I think about a year and a half ago, where he discussed the changes to the Brazilian game and explained why there was more money for these kind of deals, and this is a great example of it. West Ham basically killing the player publicly in their statement, announcing the deal, saying that they didn't want him to go. Despite the club doing everything possible to persuade Lucas to stay, he has remained adamant that his wish is to leave. Therefore, the head coach and the club have reluctantly agreed to accept his transfer request. West Ham United would like to take this opportunity to thank our management, players, staff and loyal supporters for the unwavering and devoted support they have shown to Lucas throughout this time at the club, and in particular over the past 2.5 years. No thank you whatsoever to Paqueta himself in that statement. I haven't seen one like that before from official club channels on an outgoing player. They have also taken Adama Traore, your favourite baby lotion player, Ronan from Fulham, a deal we flagged up at the start of the window. The details of that are it's a £1 million transfer fee with a potential bonus of 1 million, depending on performances. The contract is only until the end of the season. Adama's taken a pay cut on his £120,000 a week salary at Fulham. West Ham United have an option to extend the contract for another season, but interestingly, Adama has a 2-week option to reject that option should West Ham trigger it. So West Ham can decide to keep him, but he has 2 weeks in which to say, no, I don't want to stay, or I do want to stay, but you're going to have to pay me more money because I've proven that I'm good enough. And I think from all of that, you can tell that this was not driven by West Ham United. This was Nuno Espirito Santo wanting Adama back at the club, or back at his club. Someone he's worked with very successfully in the past, and West Ham structuring a deal in which they had to essentially pay the minimum possible, but they gave Nuno what he wanted in having Adama there. And I kind of like situations like this because you see a player there who's got something to prove, and it's always interesting to watch what happens when a player has a short window in which to demonstrate his quality and try and earn a new contract, either at West Ham or, I think ideally, and I think this is a factor, and when you do something like this as a club, I think Adama won't have any great loyalty to West Ham United in the summer, certainly at this point in time. And he'd be happy to move elsewhere if he proves himself capable of doing that. They'll have to convince him to stay in the summer if he does deliver the performances that he thinks he can, to earn a better contract and no longer stay in the Premier League.
I would say that he's come to the club with a chip on his shoulder, but it'll probably slip off with all that oil.
Maybe he needs to use a different kind of oil to fry the chip.
Yeah, could be. Yeah. He might have turned to air fryers in that time. I think it could be time to move on to our hero and villain of the week. I think you're choosing the hero this week.
Hero of the week, who's actually, this is an unpopular stance, I know, but he's always been a bit of a hero of mine, and increasingly, I think, demonstrated why he's a hero in recent years as he's been replaced as the president of FIFA. It's Sepp Blatter, who I think did a lot of good for the game and actually cared about the game, unlike Gianni Infantino, who's in charge at present. And Blatter went on social media this week to amplify and endorse a comment made by the Swiss anti-corruption lawyer, Mark Pieth, who had previously worked with FIFA, in an interview in Switzerland. And what Pieth said was, for the fans, there's only one piece of advice: stay away from the USA. What we're seeing domestically, the marginalisation of political opponents, abuses by immigration services, hardly encourages fans to go there. Avoid the United States. You'll get a better view on television anyway. Upon arrival, fans should expect that if they don't behave properly with the authorities, they will be immediately sent home if they're lucky. And I think Pieth raises a very important point here about what's going on in the States, and the uncertainty that a lot of supporters have as whether there's even any chance to access the country. Never mind what happens if they do manage to access the country, or they do get to the airport, and the Americans look at the 5 years of social media data that they're requesting as a condition of being granted a visa application, and say, no, we don't like what you said about someone or our country 3 years ago. You can go back. You're not getting to stay here. And I think telling that Blatter is prepared to go out there and say, I think Mark Pieth is right to question this World Cup. And this is an issue that is not going to go away quickly, given what's happening with Trump at present, given we're just a week away from him threatening to invade Europe, Greenland, and European nations rallying against that, managing to get him to back down. If something like that happens in the next few months, if Trump changes his mind again and does decide to try and take Greenland by force, I don't know how it's tenable for European nations to take part in the World Cup, or for supporters of European nations to travel to be part of that tournament. So this is unprecedented, but we are in a real point of flux here for football, and I think we know what Gianni Infantino will do, and he'll come down on Trump's side. But if the governments of Europe decide to say that boycotting the World Cup is a weapon that they need to employ, it could happen.
Yeah, I think if it was maybe any other nation, people then would be calling for their expulsion from FIFA, as we've seen in the past, that this sort of thing. But this is where FIFA is bringing the World Cup this summer, and yeah, I think we're going to be talking about this for the every day nearly from now on to the World Cup, and every criticism seems merited at the moment.
Yeah, you have Infantino with that absurd and probably by FIFA statute illegal decision to create the Peace Prize and give it to Trump, and then talk about how it was being awarded on the behalf of worldwide football supporters. What position has he got to say that he's awarding a prize to Donald Trump for his efforts in world peace on behalf of me, you, and the billions of others who follow football in the world? And then we see what happens over Greenland. We see the chaos that causes, and Infantino decides to double down by posting on social media about being present at the inauguration of Trump's peace board, where the likes of Netanyahu and Putin are initial members. And interestingly, since this is a football podcast, we should mention this, where the chairman of Manchester City is one of the guys on the podium signing a contract to be part of Trump's peace board, and presumably handing over that $1 billion that Trump was asking as an access fee for his new peace board. Yeah, look, this podcast discussed it for a long time. Football and politics are very much, geopolitics are very much tied together now, and they have been for a long time. But yeah, I think the ramifications for the game are potentially greater than they've ever been.
I'll try not to rant too much then for my bit in the week, because I will not rant about the Champions League being phased, so it doesn't seem that important. The 725 minutes to actually get a bit of action in the last day, match 8. So my bit in the week then is going to be Real Madrid, because they sacked Xabi Alonso. They got what they deserved, and now they haven't played the playoffs after that dramatic winner from Benfica that you mentioned earlier on the podcast. So yeah, Real Madrid, you are getting what you deserve at the moment, and yeah, you can be the anti-heroes or the villains that everybody wants in Champions League this season. Yeah, so thank you very much, Duncan, for your time today.
Thank you, Ronan. Good to catch up.
Yeah, and thanks to all our listeners, but not Lucas Paqueta. You've been listening to the Transfers Podcast, powered by FootballTransfers.com. If you liked what you heard, spread the word. Please follow, share, and rate us. You can message us on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook at Transfers Podcast. Our Twitter, Blue Sky, and TikTok address is at TransfersCast. I'm on Twitter at SwearMathPaul, Instagram at GoldRonan, Blue Sky at Ronan Murphy, just to complicate things. Duncan is everywhere at Duncan Castles, just to make things easier. Our production's by Mark Caulfield at Pro Podcast Production, and our music, as always, is by Mark Caulfield and David L. Stay safe, be well, and thank you for listening.
Can't go. Where everyone's gonna go. Where everyone's gonna go. Where everyone's gonna go. Where everyone's gonna go.